Hi. Today I'm going to give you a general overview of what an honors program is and kind of what you can expect from an honors program, and I'm going to give you a little bit of my own personal experience being in the honors program so that you can decide maybe if the honors program is right for you or not. So let's roll the intro. Like, generally speaking, an honors program is pretty much just a more intense, research-based degree. And the main purpose, I guess, is to kind of further develop your knowledge into a specific area of research and of interest. There's some more expectations, I would say, compared to a regular program. Like, you have to maintain a specific GPA. So for me, I have to maintain a 3.0 or higher, and every psychology class I take, I have to achieve a 3.3 GPA or higher. There's also an expectation that you carry a heavier course load, which I mean is not necessarily different in any other sciences program. It's kind of expected, especially if you want to complete it in any amount of normal time. But there's actually typically strict regulations more so. So for me, I have to take 24 credits over 2 semesters, and that's like the bare minimum I can take. So 4 classes a semester. So essentially it's your way to go kind of above and beyond what you would regularly do in a normal sciences degree, for example. So the next question we need to answer is how much work is involved with the honors program, and to put it bluntly, a lot. A lot. But I don't want that to scare you, because it is a lot of work, but it's in an area of work that you're really interested in, so it doesn't really feel like work, you know? Like for me, the lab that I'm doing my research in is heavily based in neuropharmacology, but we also tie in biology because we actually get to do research using live model organisms, which is really exciting to me. And I get to show you the lab in this video, which is also really exciting because normally we don't get to show that off, so stay tuned for that. But yeah, like I said, there is a lot of work involved. And part of it is actually doing the research and actually being in the lab and doing all those tests and running analysis and all that kind of stuff, which I mean is just, you just have to commit a lot of time to doing it. It's not necessarily difficult work, it's just very time consuming. But the preparation for your thesis is what takes a lot of work, because every week you're probably gonna have a meeting with your honors supervisor, and then in between meetings you're doing literature searches, you're applying for grants, you're filling out applications, you're preparing presentations. So it is a lot of work, and I would say honestly expect to spend about 3 to 5 hours additional a week just on your honors thesis alone. So I mean, it is quite a large time commitment, especially when we're in university and everything else is going on in your life. It can be a lot. On top of that, I mentioned the GPA, and you kind of need to stay above a certain GPA. So I mean, that in itself is a decent amount of work, to maintain your high GPA. Also, you're probably going to be required to take some specific courses. For me, I had to take stats, some research methodology classes, history and psychology. But the good thing about these classes is lots of them are not just your typical class. The research methodologies classes, for example, you're doing more hands-on. You're actually preparing a presentation, you're preparing a thesis. So it's a really good experience. It's not just another class where you have to memorize stuff for an exam pretty much, right? So it is a lot of work, but I don't want that to scare you, because most of the time it's fun work. So now that we have a general overview of what you can expect from an honors program and how much work is involved, how do you actually get in? It's likely that every institution and even every program within your school is going to be slightly different for an application process. So kind of just going to give you a general sense of what you can expect and some tips that helped me get into the honors program. So the first thing to note is that your school will probably have some sort of a presentation for the honors program that you're interested in getting into, and I highly encourage you to go to that. They'll probably give you a better sense of more specifics for your program, give you some tips on how to get in, and probably also talk about some of the research that's currently being done in the labs around your school. And after that presentation, you'll probably receive a list of supervisors that are taking on honors students for the following year. And the first thing you should do is just read through the list, see what those professors offer kind of in terms of their field of interest, and highlight the top ones that really stick out to you. And go crazy with this. Don't limit yourself to a number. Just highlight every single professor that seems like they do something that would interest you. Basically, just eliminate the ones that you don't want to work with at this point. And my tip for narrowing down your list is to take, all of those professors that you had highlighted in your long list and just do a little bit of research into what kind of research they do in their lab. Your school will probably have some sort of a web page for that professor that will show off their, their recent publications. And I encourage you to read through some of these. Even if you don't read them in detail, like just read the abstract, kind of get a general sense of what they're doing, because that's going to give you a really good insight to what they're currently working on and what they're likely going to be wanting to work on with you. You want to start sending emails to these professors letting them know that you're interested and that you want to set up a meeting with them. So the approach I took was I said a general statement about myself, which I included in all of my emails to every professor that I emailed, which you can read right here, and go ahead and pause it if you need more time. But there it is. That was not the Jeopardy music. I should know, I watch a lot of Jeopardy. Ignore that. So it's okay to have like a general statement like that, because that's just about yourself. You're gonna say the same thing about yourself to every professor. So after your personal statement, I would suggest giving a more professor-specific statement as well. And in this statement, I would suggest that you just talk about, some of the research that you've read that they've done, why you find it interesting, and kind of some ideas you might have for research in the field. After you send that email, you might get an email back saying, like something's come up and I'm actually not taking on new students next year, which is totally fine. Just say, send an email back saying, okay, thank you for letting me know, I wish you all the best in your future work, whatever, that kind of stuff, right? But most of the times the professor is going to be interested in setting up an interview with you, so that's exciting. And by preparing yourself to send that email with doing the research on the research they've done and their previous publications, that's kind of the best way to set yourself up for the interview. I mean, you know yourself, you know what you're interested in, you can kind of do a little bit of a self-reflection, especially if you're trying to get into grad school. When I was applying, a lot of people would ask me, why do you want to go into medicine? So I would have, kind of my points and reasons of why I wanted to go into medicine, and then they would ask me, what do you want to specialize in? So I kind of had a response prepared for that. And one question I actually got asked was, if you don't get into medicine, what are you going to regret most in 10 years? Which was that was probably the most difficult question I had to answer. But if you kind of just do a little bit of self-reflection before your interview, and I mean, obviously you know yourself and you know why you want to get into grad school and why you want to get into the honors program, then just be yourself in these interviews, and that's really going to shine. But I should also note that this is a partnership. They are your supervisor, but you are both working together to complete this project. So you can ask them questions too. It's okay, what do you expect from your honors students? What time commitments are you expecting? How often do you want to have meetings? What kind of research are you thinking about doing in the following years with students? These kinds of questions, get a good sense of what the actual supervisor is like too, because like I said, you're going to be working with them a lot. But don't stress too much about the interviews, because it's really just an open conversation, about yourself and your research interests and their research interests, and just seeing if you could see yourself working together. By the end of it, you're probably gonna have a few professors. For me, I had 4 or 5 that I was really interested in working with. Once you've narrowed it down to your top 3, I would send an email to those professors just saying, hi, I'm just letting you know that I am planning on listing you as one of my top picks for a supervisor. If you'd be interested in setting up another interview to ask any more questions you possibly have for me, or just to chat about future research, let me know, and then go from there. Then after that, you submit your application and you wait to see if you got accepted or not, or not accepted or not, I guess more if you matched with the supervisor or not. So we're in the fish lab now, and I don't want to be too loud because I don't really want to disrupt the fish, which are all right behind. And like I said, our lab primarily does neuropharmacology research using a model organism, and that organism is the zebrafish. Before I explain the zebrafish, I guess I should explain what a model organism is. And essentially, it's just a non-human species that we conduct research on. But I know you might be thinking, okay, how do we conduct research that will apply to humans with a fish? That's a valid question. So currently a lot of the research in our lab is based on anxiety and trying to find new treatments for anxiety, essentially. And the zebrafish are really good for this because they actually share a lot of anxiety pathways that humans have. So for example, in the fish, they have a hypothalamus pituitary interrenal axis, and humans have what's called a hypothalamus pituitary adrenal axis. And these two axes, which are anxiety pathways, are essentially identical. So we have a similar anxiety pathway that these fish have. which is kind of crazy. And a little bit more background on the zebrafish. So they're originally from, areas in Asia and India, and they live in like shallow bodies of water, and they are kind of the bottom of the food chain. Everything wants to eat them, so naturally they're anxious. If every day I walked down the street and there was a chance that some huge bird was gonna swoop down and just eat me, I'd probably be pretty anxious too. But that kind of leads into our next thing. How do we actually measure anxiety in these fish to determine if our treatments reduce their anxiety? So now we're gonna leave our housing room and we're gonna head behind this door. This door. So obviously we can't just ask the fish how anxious they're feeling today and determine if they're less anxious after their treatment. So we kind of have to use some different techniques to measure this anxiety within the fish. So the tank you're seeing on screen right now is part of the novel tank test. So the thinking behind this test is essentially as the zebrafish are less anxious, they're more likely to explore the tank. So we set up motion tracking and divide the tank into 3 sections virtually, and we can actually track how many times the fish goes in and out of each zone. And essentially the more they explore and the more time they spend in the top section of the tank, the less anxious they are. And this goes back to their nature and behavior, where they're kind of used to being at the bottom of the food chain. So they kind of want to stay either near the sides of the tank or near the bottom of the tank. So if they're feeling less anxious, they're more likely to swim around the tank, and then that's kind of how we determine if our treatment is effective or not. And so the test you're seeing on the screen now is slightly different in that we're still testing anxiety, but now we have what's called a novel stimuli in the tank. So this little Lego figure is meant to induce anxiety in the fish. Essentially they're like, what is this? Why is it here? How do I get away from it? So when they're anxious, we expect them to be spending a lot of time around the edge of the tank, called the thigmotaxis, where they're pushed up against the wall. Once again, that's where they feel safe. As their anxiety comes down, however, they're more likely to explore and even possibly go closer up to the Lego figure, which tells us that they're feeling less anxious. Sorry, not that they're feeling less anxious, because that's... and we can't, put that on the fish, because they're not actually humans. But that's our indication that they have reduced anxiety. And that's the general rundown of both honors and what I specifically do in our lab. Now at the beginning of the video I said we're gonna discuss whether I feel like honors is worth it. And based off of my smile and the fact that I'm making this video, you can probably tell that my answer is yes. Like an astounding yes, actually. Because not only does this let me develop my own research, it helps me with critical thinking skills, it helps me develop lab techniques, it just helps me be an overall better student and really dive deeper into, the literature and for developing my understanding of neuropharmacology and biology. So, it's really priceless, the information and the knowledge you gain in an honors program, in my opinion. And it also teaches you resiliency. This video is kind of different than what I normally upload. It's not really a vlog style, but kind of. But on this channel, if you're new around here, this is the first video you've seen. I'm starting a series now where I'm showing you my journey towards medical school. Hopefully, medical school. Knock on wood. And this is really just a huge aspect of that for me as a pre-med is honors and my research. So I feel like this is a really important, not necessarily step, because it's kind of, more like a full staircase that I'm gonna climb over the next year and a half. But it's really important for me to show this to you and explain kind of what an honors program is. With that being said, if you want to stay up to date with my journey towards medical school, the best way for you to do so is to subscribe and hit the notification bell. It helps you stay up to date with my videos, and it helps me kind of build this audience. So hopefully I can use this as part of my med school application one day. But that is all for me today. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one. See ya.